Yes, hello. This is Dr. Adam O'Brien, and I am going to be giving a response to Bill Maher's new rule. I think it was this weekend. I'm not sure though. Um, Replaying it here like this because
Matthew's last rehab was at a pricey clinic in Switzerland where instead of weaning off the drugs.
So I had already rushed to that point. And saw halfway, got basically mad, and now here we are. So here we go.
And finally, no, someone has to tell me why we love taking the piss out of lawyers with lawyer jokes, but not doctors. Two lawyers are standing on the curb. They see a gorgeous woman crossing the street. One says, "Boy, I'd like to fuck her." And the other one says, "Yeah, out of what?"
I could do a whole piece on lawyers, and I will have written a piece and am advocating against professional, industrialized professional issues. Um, Lawyer joke duly noted. Medical jokes are coming.
But never doctors. And yet, doctors killed Matthew Perry. Just like they killed Michael Jackson, Prince, Tom Petty, Elvis Presley. Doctors have killed more rock stars than twin-engine planes. It's okay, you can. I'll give you permission. The medical industrial complex says there are just a few, these are just a few bad apples, but are they? From 2006 to 2019, over 145 billion oxy and hydrocodone pills were prescribed, resulting in over 210,000 overdose deaths, and they weren't prescribed by the opiate fairy. Seriously, could you be any more irresponsible? Fentanyl is a drug 50 times stronger than heroin that no one heard of 10 years ago, and now it's killing thousands of people who probably started on oxy first. I've been railing against the Western medicine approach to healing for a very long time, and a lot of people hate me for it. They hate me for being honest about obesity, for questioning how we handled COVID, for lots of stuff. Because it turns out medicine is a lot like religion. It has to do with your mortality, so it's super scary, and people just want to believe in some kind of priesthood who tells you they know what you couldn't possibly know, and only they can keep you safe. But if doctors really were so infallible, then why are there so many TV shows about an eccentric genius doctor constantly proving that all the other doctors are idiots?
So, in part, what's highlighted there is the educational process. In that joke, the reason why it's funny is because it's true, and the trueness of it is around the educational training aspect of it. You have people who, and you have to think about in high school, who went to med school. It was the valedictorians, it was the salutatorians, it was the higher scoring, test taking, approval seeking, in the sense of like, let me show you what I can do with my brain and or my work ethic or with my passion, which there's nothing wrong with that. Our work highlights that uses addictive mechanisms that we have to be careful for and about. And breeds perfectionism, altruism, and ambitious addiction, and highly closely tied to the religious aspect that he has also pointed out. The length at which people will go to get their professional degrees is rather extreme. The lack of education, as pointed out by Gabor Mate, the lack of education in medicine for addictions and even currently, the current standings of the psychology's main reference diagnostic tool, which is psychiatry, so highly tied to the medical model, um, and so medically approved that this is the best that their science, quote unquote, has come up with as to like what the definition of addiction is. And within the DSM, there is no definition. They leave it to a rather vague description of it. My dissertation highlights how that is a labeling issue and whether or not it is just a matter of definitional words. When we are talking about the disease of addiction, we are talking about a concept. The actual disease is what I defined, and along with my mentor, Dr. Jamie March, addiction as dissociation. And it's mostly because the drug is too powerful. The body cannot handle 10 times the strength of heroin. So the potency, the industrialization of drugs is what is creating the conflict, the addictions, and the societal aspect, the priming of addiction um, is in our food. It is in how we live our life, how we live in comfort, how we take convenience on. So if the best that science can do or the medical model for a devastating addiction and for Matthew Perry, um, uh, if this is the best that they can do, these are the people who are selling you something that is a lie because they decided to not research it. They're just telling you what it is by not actually having to confirm it by science. And by science, I would say qualitative science. And there's a big difference between the quantitatives and the qualitatives, and they can be combined, but critical thinking would lead to critical action. And this is where you have a difference of people who are addicted to the system and dependent upon it staying the way it is, and then people who are willing to risk their careers, their names, their lives to be able to advocate against this and to whether it's self-sacrifice for the greater good of the bigger picture, the moral of the story, the higher good instead of the greater good. If the greater good is group think, then there's an issue. If there is no critical thinking, then there's an issue. And people who are trained are not able to critically think as readily as people who are, I would say, more streetwise or common sense wise because they have been stuck in books. I've had a career where I've had both and have developed different sides to that. Have long-term recovery, and I see a major professional problem more than I see, and which leads down to the individuals who collectively agree to co-sign each other's BS or has to follow their BS legally. And when we look at how the APA should have addressed, attacked, denied that the AMA was allowed to give feedback to the government about shutting down during COVID. And the legal minds, of which apparently in 2009 under Obama, they had a protocol for these types of things, whether it was 2009 or 2012, whatever it was. Point being, it's just that they had a protocol, they didn't follow it. That's wrong. No culpability. The news cycle moves too quick. People are just missing it. And, some people are different news outlets, news channels, whatever, wherever you get your feed. But the reality of it is when we start talking about addiction and how the mental health system continues to support the American medical model, that is where we need to have a separation because agreeing to them is co-signing it is enabling, and that isn't an addiction in the DSM, and it is the one of the main reasons why addictions would exist, because you can't have a giver without a taker.
Did you know that only 2 countries in the whole world allow prescription pharmaceuticals to be advertised on TV? One of those countries is us, where over $1 billion a month is spent on ads that have 3 recurring messages. 1, no one in America can piss or shit except when they least expect it. 2, active old people love tennis and fucking. And 3, there's no problem you can't fix with a pill. Even if your problem is you take too many pills, we have a solution to that, another pill. We're so numb to drug ads, we don't even question the logic of ask your doctor if it's right for you. How incompetent is my doctor if I have to let him know that the best remedy for what ails me is a drug he didn't even think of?
And there lies the ignorance of the legal and the advertising marketing. It made sense to say, ask your doctor about this. So you can have a conversation about it, so he can or she can prescribe such a well-formulated, researched medication that would help you with these problems, of which you had to have heard word to mouth about the symptoms. So at some point in your diagnostics, your own diagnostics, you went and said, hey, I'm having this issue. Like, I'm having a burning pain over here. What could that be? Oh, that is, that's your appendix where you're pointing. So how bad? 0 to 10. It's like a 8. Okay, go to the hospital. When the commercial is describing a diagnostic or symptoms, that is being labeled by the doctor. That is what the doctor sees. That is what the doctor and the system of doctors have created, and they have research to be able to relatively confirm these things. I'm not doubting that these things have their validity in the constructs in which they exist, from the minds in which created them, and the words that they have used to label such things as other. Right? Symptoms are an experience that is being had as a result of an issue on some level, and or a conflict and or a previous stress, which starts getting into a whole nother kind of realm of conversation and, when things are happening. But diseases are echoes through our life. We have lived and evolved with diseases our whole existence. They're not going anywhere. And when we talk about addiction as a disease, it's relevant to understand it as a metaphor rather than a fact, because they will make it sound like a fact when it isn't, and they can use that to sell it to be able to do that. And another example is how Big Farm has done the research, and then 30 years later, we do the research, and it is the exact opposite. For example, that mental health is due to a chemical imbalance, in which that is not possible. Because what would create an imbalance in the neurotransmitter chemicals is stress and or experiences from the past, or things that would dysregulate the system. To create the conditions, external would be in creating the internal conditions, and sometimes there are internal conditions that are creating the internal conditions, of which would be more trauma and dissociative means, of which would have an addictive quality to it, hence some of our work. The saying that mental health is due to a chemical imbalance, or that there is a non-addictive opiate, or that a safe vaccine that has now become a flu shot. These things are lived common sense understandings that even goes back to the 80s selling us that, nicotine is non-addictive based on the science that they did. It it doesn't make sense that they would be in charge of addiction or the medicines and or the logic that breeds their opinions or science.
What else doesn't he know? I'm starting to wonder if there's really no better way to check for cancer than through my ass. Matthew Perry asked his doctor, is ketamine right for me? And his licensed and trained legitimate doctor texted another doctor and wrote, I wonder how much this moron will pay. Let's find out. Apparently, the Hippocratic Oath now means
Moron. Moron. Yeah.
first do no harm to your bank account. Sometimes it takes a village to kill an addict. Matthew and I weren't super close.
We have to come to define an addict as more than just a substance or gambling. Because if you can't see a professional being addicted to their bank account, making their money on morons, then it's time for a re-education. And welcome to the Wounded Healers Institute.
But he was enough of a friend and enough of a good guy to make me very angry when I read about all the enablers. I mean, done in by your assistant? To a celebrity, that's the cruelest blow of all. Matthew's last rehab was at a pricey clinic in Switzerland where instead of...
Well, even in that point, okay, so in Hollywood, like you create family amongst your assistants and you pay them and you expect them to do what is right for you. But if you are like desperate for a drug, they're going to give you what it is that you are asking for, because if you don't, you lose your livelihood. So to me, like, we have to be careful with who is depending on us and who we are allowing to become dependent on us. As human beings, as anybody in any kind of relationship, are we creating a dependent relationship, or are we promoting self-efficacy, individualization, and critical thinking? This is the difference between being trained and being educated.
Weaning him off the drugs he was on, which is how we naively assume rehab works. They simply gave...
Naively understand how rehab works. Yes. That is not rehab. That is detox. That is like the first step of going through biological symptoms for a time period to get the drug out of you, get the physical dependence out. Then the psychological starts, and the psychological starts right away. But like, you ride it out like you're sick, like you're staying home for school for a week. In some cases, yes, obviously people are medically compromised and need to have medical care and everything like that. But it is just getting sick, depending on your history and a lot of different factors. Consult a medical professional, blah blah blah. But you're just waiting to see what happens as a medical professional sitting in detox. You're just waiting to see how this plays out. And as a person who has been through it, you're just waiting to see how this illness plays out. Just like every mother and father who's watching a certain progression and, like, the school system. Okay, what happened when? Because I know I want to be prepared for when this wave comes. Common sense.
And a different drug.
We don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. We don't need a doctor to have learned what our neighbor has told us that our kids are going to be going through in the next 48 hours because they played the other day, and us being able to be rational and common sense and not clogging up the medical system by sending them every time our kids have a, uh, sniffle. Prevention is the best, and that is based in education.
Accomplish the goal. If the goal was getting Matthew Perry addicted to a new drug, it's like
And this is my issue with medical model being in charge and or like dominant and legally dominant over um, uh, psychedelics, particularly. Um, Ketamine is a dissociative, which creates, I would say, a hallucinogenic and or a psychedelic effect. Um, as these are the categories that they have created, they all are doing the same thing, as our research points to. And ketamine, as a healing agent, you can be overhealed. You can be doing too good. And in a sense, people who utilize psychedelics to help them unlock answers and know that the drug isn't what treats you. And this is where I think there's a huge disconnect between their definition of working with medicine and or prescribing medicines. They are looking at it as being like a safe course of events, meaning like if you're looking at um, when you take like an antibiotic and you work yourself down, like you have to finish all the way through, otherwise you can get it again, right? um there are like those procedural type of things that they are good at, but working with medicine is working with the states of psychology that are stressed when you are in a medicine state. Doesn't matter what medicine it is. It's how are you using the medicine? What are you noticing as an effect? What are you, not the symptoms of it, but like what is psychologically going on for you? If you have no way of measuring the psyche and or understanding consciousness and the brain waves that are being activated and where people are, our process is to look at a brain scan to be able to see these things. Medical doctors haven't been doing that for very long. And from a mental health perspective, by looking at this and seeing how people are organized and seeing how people are describing exactly what is going on with them without a brain scan, tells me that they're not lying. Morons is what they call us.
he had stopped by the firehouse and they set him on fire. I'm not a doctor. Again, just a comedian who couldn't possibly know what they know. But here's a thought. If the world's single most famous living drug addict, the one who had just written a book with the phrase, "the big terrible thing" in the title, the guy who more than anyone on earth came pre-advertised to be weak to the allure of drugs, if that guy comes to you for help, maybe don't give him more drugs.
Yeah, no drugs is a good start. Understanding addiction is their job. And they don't have accurate information.
Ketamine clinics are now a growth industry. There's over 500 just in America. It's what always happens with Western medicine. The insistence on pretending that their respectable drugs aren't the same as street drugs. But they are. One is paid by insurance and gets you into rehab. One isn't, and you go to jail. But Oxy is heroin, Adderall is meth, and Ritalin is cocaine for kids.
And food is alcohol. Sugar is any drug. Yeah, it doesn't. TV, any relationship, anything that you can form a relationship to, work, success, privilege, power, corruption. Like this is the crux of it.
Ketamine was an illegal club drug in the 70s, but then it got approved as an anesthetic by the FDA. The same folks who brought you the opioid crisis. What could go wrong? There was a hit song in the 80s called I Want a New Drug. Who doesn't? Life can be tough. People have been arguing forever about what the real gateway drug is. It's whatever is the first one you do. Beer, pot, or with kids today, the pharmaceutical shit their own parents and teachers put them on.
Happens before that. Diet.
Parents, teachers.
Chaos. Drama. Safety. Being addicted to these things is a valid argument.
And doctors. Drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, food that tastes great but slowly kills you. Everybody needs to know going in that when it comes to resisting anything that makes a profit in America, you're on your own. And now there are companies like Mind Bloom, which prescribe ketamine after a virtual appointment with one of their doctors. And they had advertised right on Reddit and TikTok.
It's an at-home ketamine therapy, which, yes, that's a psychedelic medicine. You have your journal, you have a sleep mask, your blood pressure monitor is your prescribed medication.
Sleep mask, horse tranquilizer, same diff. It's all a mix. This is the exciting new frontier in American medicine. Doctors prescribing dangerous substances to patients they've never met over Zoom. It all makes me kind of nostalgic for the days when your drug dealer was someone you actually knew. Someone in your college dorm like, well, me. That is hot in my hand. Yes, I know something about addiction because I smoked cigarettes for 20 years. That's an addiction. When the drug tells you when to do it, yeah. I'm not addicted to pot because pot never does that, and I've never been an everyday smoker. And to those wise asses always asking me if I get high before the show, the answer is no. Well, not right before.
So not having seen it all the way to the end, whether or not that was the end or whatever, but you know, where do you go from here? Where do you go to apply this knowledge? How do you change your dependence on a system that has created your dependence, that thinks you're stupid and moronic? and has so much science backing both sides as right. And they are both right from a perspective of conscious awareness. The people calling people insane are insane. The people trying to solve a problem that isn't a problem are insane. Mental health has a normal baseline of range. Overprescribing is connected to profit, is connected to incentives, is connected to markets, finance, law. Being critical of a system that has ulterior motives, that are profit driven, that fuel economies, is what the interdependence is. If it's all fair and it's all agreed upon, then no issue. But you can't have an illness that they gave you, meaning a younger generation or a previous generation. You have to be upset at your parents for leaving the house the way that they are, as they are moving into the age range of death. And the wisdom that is being taught to the next generation is to continue doing what we're doing. Needing a new drug. That's what each holiday season is. Because if people aren't selling things and money isn't moving around, and if money isn't moving around, there aren't people there to kind of snatch it up. That's why you want to create conditions in which people have to dip into their reserves, where they have to start sacrificing in order to maintain a way of life that is way beyond their means, but has been able to get to their level of means through industrialization and to raise some type of standard that people can enjoy, but they become dependent and have that expectation. When the reality of our situation is we are dependent on the conveniences that they're selling us and the speed in which their industries are going. And the only true way to vote ourselves off this island is to, I wish I could say vote in a way that is in your conscientious, through your conscientious objector. Um, but industries and professions are blocking progression from happening. And the example that I use, the AMA and the APA, there's a power differential between those parents. Uh, my research diffuses it if people can come to an acceptance of the definitions that I'm using, which I think are more commonsensical. Whether or not people want to make changes isn't going to be up to the generation that it's happening to. a lower standard is going to have to be achieved. Accepting what is ultimately is going to be what is required of every citizen in order to fuel a exponential profit motive. Finding a system that works individually makes sense. Collectively, it starts to take away freedoms. And the freedom to choose to have health and the drugs that you choose over their drugs, having a knowledge and a wisdom that allows you to be able to be an informed consumer of your medical and psychological history or needs. This is what we offer is an approach to understanding how you can get your own answers and know that they are true. Am I crazy? We have an answer for that. Am I going mad? We have an answer for that. We have your answer for that. How can we help you find that in order for you to know what is going on for yourself? To know who I am, to know what I want, to know who we are as a species, um, as a living and breathing entity. Being alive requires being able to grow. Anything that's limiting your growth is not alive. It is killing you. We are preparing people for death, individually and collectively. And out of death can come a rebirth. So we are, in the Wounded Healers Institute, are committed to walking a line of recovery with psychedelics from the systems that they come from and teaching everyday Americans how to self-medicate from a harm reduction standpoint, a research-informed, I would call an evidence-based practice, um, with the labeling of that, because all my research has been based on evidence-based practices, uh, of which would neutralize the power differential between these two parent professions, namely psychology and the medical model. And we don't have to live in fear of death. And when we are not afraid of death, we actually may be able to change the course of history and tide of insanity that is going on, because insanity exists and it is in the reasoning and the logic that tells us to keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, or doing the same thing just because we think it worked without thinking about it critically. It's a tragedy with Matthew Perry, but like Prince is a tragedy. I mean, Tom Heartbreaker, I mean, Hendrix, I mean, um, as artists, we have to learn healing. And we have to learn to do drugs responsibly on our own terms. Um, and that is what we do to help people learn and grow with them rather than die from them. So thank you.